the screen. Let's do this one here. Yeah, all good then. Thank you so much for those of you who've joined me in the Zoom room for this podcast launch party. You know how long I've been working on this. All right, so I'm having an echo. So I'm going to close one of the windows. That's annoying. And I'm going to check the live stream on my phone, so I don't actually hear it. So I wanted first to introduce all some of my guests, some of my 12 guests for this year. The podcast first, I need to say, is called True Spirituality with Ange. It follows on to a summit that we organized back in July, where Santa, Claire, Emma, and Stephanie were actually speakers. I was very fortunate to have them as speakers. We were expecting a couple more guests, and I'm still hoping that one of them will join us, because the first guest of the month, which is today, his name is Jose Pereira, and he has a fabulous interview about, it's actually not so much about the 5 years he was held in captivity as a hostage in Venezuela, but it's more about how it has transformed him, what things helped him through the ordeal. And actually, from the interview, which I hope you will get to at some point, he shares how that's actually deepened and awakened his spirituality in ways that he would have never imagined. And I'm sure some of you in this Zoom room would have had an experience that actually has maybe knocked on your door or made you more aware that actually there's something bigger happening here, or maybe helped you to look at things in a different way. So maybe we could share our experience of an aha moment in the absence of Jose today. I don't think I had a lot more I wanted to say before we get started. I wanted all of you to ask a question from Jose, so I don't know what we're going to do with that. Let's say I want to share a little bit of the why of this podcast here today. I am concerned and also upset, and I think sometimes that's a very good motivation for doing things, about the lack of inclusivity and diversity in the spiritual and religious circles. It almost feels like people are just saying, you know, do what I say and then you'll get to heaven, or you'll be saved and everybody else is doomed. And I don't actually believe for a second that this is the truth. So my podcast is trying to break the mold and give people an option to create their own very personal blueprint. And I think all my guests have had a chance to do that themselves and are living, glowing examples of this. And hopefully we'll have a lot more people who are freed from this framework that is a bit antique and a bit restricted. Okay, so Emma just said I need to put my video on public, so I'm going to do that now. Thank you, Emma. So perhaps who's happy to talk first? Because I'd like to ask some of you, how have you created your own version of spirituality, and what helped you to do that? So, can I start with you, Emma? Are you okay? Because I know.
I was busy sharing everywhere on Facebook. What was the question? Please repeat the question.
No. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, and actually, I need to go and make it public as you suggested. Yeah, my question was, since we're talking about creating a new options for people to explore their own spirituality on their own terms, with their own flavor. How did you do that for yourself, Emma?
That's a really good question. Yeah, so, you know, I came into spirituality, you know, looking, seeking, trying to find my way, feeling very alone. And it's funny because, you know, I've just listened to your podcast about cults. And so I was like, oh yeah, this is really interesting. And so, I found my way into, I wouldn't call it an out and out cult, but it was certainly a spiritual group that was culty. I certainly found my way through that and came out the other side and went, you know what, actually, my intuition is guiding me this way. And I was doing everything I could within that space to really cultivate my own guidance, my own intuition. As a medical intuitive, it's the work I was doing. And the more work I did with clients, the more it opened me up as well to my own guidance. And so what I found was I was pulled away from that group. And, it was nothing bad about that group, but it meant that I was no longer following. I was now leading in a way that I hadn't expected to. And that what I found was it was very freeing. And it meant that I was finding my own way in a really empowered way, as opposed to what I had before, which I felt really lost and alone. And I was no longer lost and alone because I had guidance. And so I love that that's one of the things you talk about in that podcast, about having your intuition, really trusting your intuition and really starting to connect with it, because it really is a true compass. It really does help to navigate. And, there were red flags in my intuition before that I should have listened to. Looking back, obviously there's no shoulds. It was the exact right path for me. But to have that the compass coming out the other side, for years now, it has guided me really strongly to know what's right for me. And that's really helped with my spirituality. So, and there was times certainly early on where I felt that I had to stay very quiet about, whether or not I ate meat, whether or not I had meditated at 5 a.m. or, all of that stuff. I felt like I had to be really quiet about that in certain circles. And so I was really, really quiet about that for a very long time. But anyone who knows me knows what my life is like. I don't have secrets around that. So it's not, now I've realized that my intuition tells me whether or not that's actually the right path for me, and I trust that. It doesn't make me any less spiritual. And so I've gone, the more I trust, the more it comes, the more information comes. It's like paving a footpath into a super highway with intuition. And that's helped me create my own individual version of spirituality. And to be able to stand on my own 2 feet as essentially, I am a spiritual leader in many ways, but I believe that people step up beside me and we walk together. I'm not, at the top of any pyramid pile. I invite people to come along. Let's learn this together. Let's do this. I'm always the student of this work. And I think that's actually really, really helpful when you're finding your own path as a spiritual person, is to know that you're always the student, but you don't have to necessarily learn from others who are teaching. You can learn from your own intuition. You can learn from your own experience. You can try things out and go, yeah, that's not for me. It's great that you love that and that's been life-changing for you, but it's not for me. And to trust that. That's been really life-changing for me. So thank you for that podcast, because I was like, oh yeah, that's really ringing some bells.
I think that was the starting point for me. Intuition is the best satellite navigation system to keep you safe in what shark-infested water.
Shark-infested waters.
But so thank you. And I wanted to ask each of you, so I'm asking you, Emma, and then we'll move on to the next guest. If you want to raise your hand to be next, go. If not, I'll pick someone. But I wanted to ask you, what's the number one spiritual truth you wish you had known at the start of your journey?
That I was able to learn from my own experiences, and that they were just as valid as somebody else's experiences. I, at that point, didn't know anything about spiritual supremacy. I didn't know anything about, I really had guru complex. I really did look up to people and go, they know so much more than me. I'm not worthy. I'm so humble. I need to learn. I know nothing. I need to keep my mouth shut and just do what everyone tells me. Because I felt like I was really out of my depth. They were talking about stuff I had no idea what they were talking about. They were using words that I didn't know what they meant. And people were throwing around words, even as simple. I remember there was a time where I'm like, I don't even want to put my hand up and say it. You're all using this word consciousness. I have an understanding of what that means, but you're all using it in ways that make no sense to me. And like, I didn't have the courage to say that. It was being thrown like quantum. It's like, I know what quantum means. It means really small. Like, it's a science term, right? It's like people throw these terms around in a context that makes no sense to someone who's new to spirituality. And they've got all these other meanings for it that aren't necessarily in the dictionary. And it's very exclusive language, and it leaves people feeling vulnerable and on the outer, and they want to be part of the club. So they join in. And I was very much that person at the beginning. And I wish I'd known that not knowing those words didn't make me less spiritual. I wish I'd known that not understanding some of those concepts or knowing all of the ascended masters didn't make me less spiritual. I wish I'd known that, because if I'd known that, I would have gone, oh, I'm good. Okay, I can just do this stuff and I can learn from there.
Emma, thank you so much for that. I think so many people will thank you for it, because there's a bit of snobbery going on around all sorts of things, and really there's no need for that. Okay, Stephanie said she's happy to go next. Thank you, Stephanie. Very brave of you. But what I do love about all of you, and we had a very brief glimpse at Jose, and he's disappeared again, so I'm hoping he's going to come back. He was a real person during the interview, I promise. What do you want to say? I think what I really
just
love
to interrupt.
about... Yeah,
just to interrupt, Claire wants to go next because she's got 4 children downstairs, and they might interrupt her at any moment.
Okay.
So
all right. So Claire,
we'll get her in next, and then I'll go.
Thank you. I have 4 children that are currently being quiet, so I'm very lucky. Yes. What Emma said was amazing, and so much of it rings true, actually. And for me, it was, I wish I had known that I could be a person that could be spiritual, because I just didn't think I could. That's for someone else, that person that can, do the things well, a bit sort of perfectly, and has their life all in order, and they know what they're doing, and does the getting up really early and meditates and yoga, all those things. I just genuinely thought that's what you had to do, and I could never be that person, therefore it's just not for me. So just to find out, I had about 6 years ago, after my second child, I had a huge breakdown, which is obviously terrible at the time, but actually it allowed me to build myself up, and that really started my kind of healing journey. So like the word journey, healing adventure, let's say, so on my path. And for me, just having all of those realizations then, that actually I could do things and I could be that person, I think, yeah.
That's wonderful, Claire. And you know what I want to say? This is so beautiful what you just said, because I believe, and my own experience is that the spiritual path is a very messy path.
Yes.
People think it's like sitting on top of mountains and hearing those, hearing the harps or whatever it is that people... No, it's going to start with you losing your job. That's how it started for me. Or it's going to start with you having something that's very challenging, because it's almost like the universe says, no, okay, you want to progress? This is what you need to learn first, and then that and that and that, and you never know what's going to come next. Yeah. Not to discourage people, but I think we need to be honest about this. This is how it works, right?
Yeah, and it's not linear, because I thought that after this kind of say breakdown and then building myself up, I was like, oh great, well I'm now on a path, so I'm here, so what I'll do is I'll keep doing this, and what's happened is I've done this and then gone, oh, I didn't know that, oh, I didn't know that, and sort of finally come round to there is no end bit. So I'm not going to get to this bit here. It's all about acceptance, and it's okay to go backwards and kind of all of that. But that's taken me years to kind of to realize that, I guess.
I love that. There's no destination, right? We have to enjoy the journey. Wow, that's profound. Yeah. Anything else you wanted to add, Claire, before
well, as being a conscious parent coach, I guess for me, I talk very much about our children being our shining lights. You know, for me, they are the ones that just shine the light in the areas that I need to work on, that I need to heal, that I might have sort of inner childhood wounds. Like, they are amazing at doing that. And obviously, as a parent, it can be quite frustrating when they do that. But sort of parking the ego to one side and being able to say, thank you, I can see that's an area I need to do some work on. You know, that's how I try and view my children in a very, very helpful light to me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Claire. I can't wait to have you on the podcast. Obviously, Emma too, and all of you, but I'm taking you one at a time. Okay, Chantal or Stephanie? Who's going to be next? You're pointing at Stephanie. Okay, go ahead then.
Hello.
Oh, Stephanie, do you want me to ask you the question, or do you want to introduce yourself a little bit first, or straight as you want it, really?
You know, I just had a bit of an aha moment when Emma was speaking actually about her experience in a cult, because I was in a different, I just had a bit of a, so my sort of breakdown moment lasted about 7 years. You know how people, you know, a lot of people have like a short moment. My moment just went on and on, on and on and on, and probably is continuing to go on, to be honest, where I felt I was indoctrinated by mainstream university, and it almost killed me. I was very, very ill at the end of it, and it took me about 20 years to recover from my incongruence with trying to fit into a box, or, you know, fit a round peg into a square hole, because the path that they were trying to teach was a very left brain, logical, theoretical, data driven basis for what a psychologist should look like. And over many years, I've realized that I'm actually very right brain and intuitive. And whilst I love learning about theory and things that underpin my work, I just can't work to a system or, you know, to a whole set of rules. And so when I realized this and I was able to free myself from the rules that they told me that I must abide by in order to do what I want to do and, you know, help people to be where they want to be, that was like a really critical turning point. And now, you know, my spirituality opened up very, very gradually. I've always considered myself a spiritual person. But now, you know, something that I love about what you're doing, Ange, with your podcast is to help people to find their own connection to the universal energy, whether you call that God or source or the universe or higher consciousness or intuition, you know, whatever word you want to put onto it. Because I think it's really sad that with, you know, a lot of people rejecting traditional religions, that then they've also rejected, you know, any higher being or any sort of connection to God or to their higher selves or whatever. And I think that that's a really sad state of affairs for a lot of people, because I think if they can be shown a way to be able to be connected to God, and I use that word deliberately because it is a bit triggering, because people do associate it with religion, but in actual fact, if we can make that our connection with God what we want it to be, rather than what an organization or an institution has told us it should be, then I feel like that's just going to help people live life with a lot more trust, with a lot more ease, with going with the flow, with seeing that higher purpose. You know, like Claire said, if you can rise above, you know, the issues that you've got with your kids and the frustrations and see the higher purpose, it's no different than with anything that our life is presented with. It just makes things, you know, a lot more easier, and you're actually a lot more powerful to be able to overcome obstacles and to find your purpose and to get true fulfillment, which is what I think we're here for. So that's my little rant for the day.
I wouldn't call that little. I think it's very powerful what you just said. I think if you're deprived, or if you can't relate traditional religions, then you're left in this vacuum, and that's what we're talking about. But what's really interesting as well is I believe you can be spiritual without believing in God or needing to have the concept of God, which is why I actually have one of my guests coming in November who's an atheist, and we had this conversation. So it was quite interesting. This is also the part of the community that feel is often left out, because for me, spiritual means heart-centered. And of course, there's people who don't believe in God who are heart-centered. I was reminded, actually, and I'm not going to go too much into the detail, but I used to take my kids to church because it was a social event with other kids in the village. I still live in the village. And one day the vicar came to me and he said, I cannot believe how much your children embody the Christian values. And I was like going to say, well, they don't need to be Christians to have these values. These values exist outside of the church. And he knew that I wasn't coming to church for the religious side of things. So I took it actually as a very high compliment. I don't think values and ethics are exclusive to religious or spiritual communities. And I want to acknowledge that so that everybody can feel, I mean, they probably don't care actually. What I've come to think, maybe they don't, but for those who do, I want them to feel that they're included in the discussion, that they have something valuable to bring to the table, even if they don't relate to this concept of God or universal intelligence or whatever. All right, Chantal. Oh, I haven't asked if you're finished, Stephanie. Did you want to add anything? Or what was the one spiritual truth you wish you had known 10, 20 years ago, whenever it was that?
I mean, the main thing is, I think that, it's like, it's just for me to have my own way of working, and that it doesn't need to follow a set of rules that someone else created for me. I think that's the main thing. I'm not a big one on I wish I had known something X years ago, because we all thought, we discover the next part as the purpose of the journey. But for the purpose of the exercise, I think that's the main thing, is it's okay to be me and just work the way I work and not have to follow any rules or structure or whatever. So
yeah, I guess the reason I'm asking this question so that it can benefit other people who might actually be trapped into a belief that's not helping them really. And we come across a lot of spiritual and religious beliefs when we start or continue or commence our journey. And it's important to be able to be discerning towards these beliefs and if they don't feel right, say, that's not for me.
And especially about money, which is what you're going to interview me about later on in early next year. And there are a lot of religious beliefs around money that a lot of people don't even realize that they hold and that are taught, such as money is the root of all evil. It's a perfect example. And, I look forward to chatting to you more about how we can debunk a lot of these myths and beliefs and how we can all be wealthy.
No, I really appreciate your contribution. And obviously there's already all this information available on the summit, which I think is mentioned. I mentioned where to listen to the summit in the episodes anyway. So if you listen to the podcast, you'll be directed to the summit, where you will find Emma, Stephanie, Claire, and Chantal, and others. All good, Stephanie? All right, thank you. Chantal, did you want to break your silent retreat for us?
Yes, I will. Yes, thank you. It's been interesting because I had verbal diarrhea today, because I hadn't spoken for 3 days, and suddenly I had a voice, and that suddenly now crashed because, again, thinking about spirituality, I'd always wanted to go on a silent retreat. And looking back now, I realized I'm glad I didn't, because having been through trauma the last 14 years, it would have actually had a very negative effect on me. And so I did it on my own in the home because my partner's away. And it just really reminded me of how much we do get caught up, like everyone else has said, in other people's beliefs, whatever that might be. And when you've been through trauma, something had happened. So I had childhood trauma, but I'd always had intuition and spirituality. I didn't realize that. So when we all started talking about it and we started being a lot more on Facebook and social media, I didn't get it because I didn't understand what this was all about. And you had to be a certain way because I was just my way. I had forged my own way through Reiki and just being me. But I lost sight of that with the trauma. So what I did was, because I'd lost sight of that and lost sight of me and my confidence, I then bought into what spirituality should be. I bought into what it should be to meditate. I bought into what it should mean to be whatever it might have been. So, and how to run a business and how to do this and how to do that and the divine feminine. And, I wanted to be all this beautiful, ethereal sort of way of doing things, and blah, blah, blah. And as I was sitting quietly these last 3 days, I realized, like everyone said, yet again, how powerful it is just to be with yourself, because this is where it is. It's within. It's within. And doesn't mean you can't learn from others. It doesn't mean you can't listen to others. It doesn't mean that you can't, but take what you want. And as my psychologist said to me recently, because I was asking her as I'm writing my memoir, Ange, you're helping me with that. I wanted to understand where I'd been in the very beginning. And I'd lost discrimination. I no longer could discriminate. I thought it was discerning. She didn't actually know it's discrimination. So I couldn't discriminate between, yes, that is right for me, no, it isn't. So I just followed everyone and got even more lost and confused and didn't understand that I was already it. I was already that. I was already intuitive. I had been for years. So it's beautiful to come back to that place of just knowing, trusting myself again, and talking about how trauma affects us in that way. And that a lot of spiritual teachers, and again, this is a generalization, aren't therapists. So they don't understand how to hold you in that space. Because I did go on a couple of retreats in the beginning. And of course, I triggered. They didn't know how to hold me. And I didn't know that either. So I had no clue about that. So that's what I want to bring to the fore as a holistic counselor, is for people to understand, I will work with you with your intuition, but I'll also hold you in the space of when you do get triggered, how I can support you to come through, because it is triggering. It can be triggering going through all this. Look at myself, I'm so proud of myself that I've got to this point where I can sit here. I am me. And that's it. I am me. I am. So if anyone just sitting here, just say, I am. That is a very powerful statement. That's all you actually really need to say in the end, because it's I am, whatever that is, and however you identify as that. So I found these conversations listening to various podcasts that I did of you guys, and thinking, oh my God, I had no idea that that's where it had gone. So all this spiritual bypassing, this whole guru type state, this whole, you've got to do it a certain way. I didn't get that. I was so blown away by it. Yet I'd got caught up in it without realizing that I had. And that I had become the follower. I had become the, what do you call it when someone, I'd become addicted to it as well. I had to learn more and more and more and more. How much more did I still need to do? More healing, more this, more that. I didn't know enough. And that's partly why I, as I said, keep going back to counseling for those who do wish to do that. Well, I know for me how powerful it was. I had kept coming back to me. I didn't need to learn anymore. As I found my self-worth again, my own confidence, and I began to feel free, then I could just sit with that. I stopped. I don't need to learn anymore for now. I can learn when I'm ready. I can learn in a whole different way. It's no longer that need that I'm not enough. I need to know more. I have enough. I have enough here. So I now can discriminate what I want to read more. I'd like to read that. I'd like to listen to that. It's a big difference because I'm making the choice and I'm choosing how I want to live in that space. And there's real freedom in that. Real freedom. And I think it's also coming, we haven't spoke age. I've turned 60 and something has changed. I turned 60 and the light went on. It's like something happened. And the last 7 months have been, in a way, ironically, some of the best of my life, because I am who I am. And I have a wisdom now. I want to own that. I want to share that. I want to show that being 60 is exciting. You know, yes, my body is changing. Yes, I have the creaks and aches. Yes, I get irritable. You know, I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I'm not 60 years young. I'm 60 years old, because that is part of the process. Again, I don't want to bypass that. I want to own the Marga woman going into the crone stage and honoring myself for that. And then whoever around me wants to join me on that. Thank you.
I'm hoping that I didn't miss this, but what would be the one spiritual truth you wish you had known 10, 20 years ago?
Well, I suppose for me it was even less than that. It was 14 after the accident, not to actually take it as truth. I took it as truth, their truth, and then their truth, and then their truth. Just to have sat back and go, that's theirs, but it's not mine. You know, like I think we're all been saying, there's a separateness. So I really like to look back and just say to myself, just give myself compassion and love that I was in such a state I didn't actually get what I was doing. But now I do.
Okay, thank you. So we had a comment under the video from someone who said, when you're trying to get clarification on a big decision, do you use any tools like tarot? I've been following my inner yes, but big decisions I'm not confident. So I'm wondering if any one of you wants to chip in on that. Yeah.
I have an internal yes and an internal no, and I feel them in my body. First of all, I clarify that, because sometimes we think our intuition's landing as we hear it or we see it, but sometimes we feel it, and it's more like a feeling of expansion or a feeling of contraction. So I go into that feeling for me, for that yes and no. And if I'm still finding that I'm getting all mixed up in my head and I'm overthinking things, because, you know, it's our brain that really often kicks in, right? It's the busy mind that jumps in and starts to cloud it out, or crowd it out. And then it's very hard to discern what's yes and what's no. And what's our mind saying, just do it. I actually still really love the thing that you taught me, Ange, in a session once. You taught me the tarot deck, where you split the deck in half, you turn half up the other way, you shuffle it, and then you ask the question and put the card out. If it's upright, it's yes. If it's upside down, it's no. If it's upright, it's yes. If it's upside down, it's no. It's so simple, and it's actually fun. It makes me literally laugh out loud while I'm doing it. And I go, of course it's yes. Like, of course I know that. Like, it's just, the cards have no power. I already know the answer before it lands, but I'm so busy arguing it in my head and overthinking all the options. I still find that a really beautiful, simple way to use cards. To just make it playful and fun and take all the thinking out of it, all the trying to get the right answer. I think it's a really fun way to do it. I love that. So thank you for teaching me that.
Thank you, Emma. Yeah, I find it, there's a debate though, where people say, oh, you shouldn't use cards, you should trust your intuition. But when you tune into your body, sometimes you can, and it's really clear and it's really easy, but other times it's not. So there's two things we can do at that stage. Either it's because we're not ready, we don't have all the information, and we could just sit still and say, I will have the clarity when I do, and it's going to be perfect, and trust that. Or we can get the cards out and see if that helps us a little bit. But then, Emma, I really like what you said. I want to, this is giving me a golden opportunity, even though I haven't talked about the tarot at all on the podcast yet, and I might at some point, to say the question that you ask is so important. You rate it. You have to be a wordsmith with your question, because it has such a massive impact on the answer that you receive. So make sure you write that question down first. And also make sure that you question what you've written down. Is that really what I need to ask? And that actually is an art that can take years to perfect. That doesn't mean that you can do it right away, but it means that you'll learn from your mistakes and that it's a constant improvement process. I think that's what I would add to what you just said, Emma. I hope that's okay that I chipped in.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the other things I noticed with it is that if I'm asking, I often ask little questions, lots and lots of little ones. And I go, well, what about this? And what about that? You know, and it'll just be like, I'll just be pulling out cards. But I get an instant feeling of, yes, that's true, and no, that's not. And so then I'm getting really clear. It comes back into my intuition as well, that even if the card says no, I go, oh, no, that's not true. Like I can actually still feel into that. And so the intuition still trumps the cards in a lot of ways as well. So I absolutely agree. The questions are important. And I've found that making them as simple and as yes, no-y, they need to be really binary questions, right? They have to be really clear cut. There's one answer or another. And then that makes it easier as well. But yeah, that often your intuition will then kick in and it'll be so clear because you'll know whether or not it feels the right answer for you.
Yeah, sometimes it's the reaction to the card. And I also want to add one last little dimension, is that it's also sometimes a question of timing. So if you get a yes or a no and you're super disappointed, ask, is it a yes now or a no now, or is it a yes forever or whatever, or for, you know, for the whatever. So that can also help, because then that means, and it's happened to me so many times, it was not the right time to ask the question. But because of my anxiety or my overthinking, I needed an answer right away. Well, the cards kind of played with me and it was like, here you go. You want to know? You're gonna get an answer. You don't necessarily like it, but that's happening. So yeah, I mean, I think I will do, and I'm actually going to be interviewed on a podcast soon for Halloween on a networking podcast about how to use tarot cards, because I feel that it's wonderful that they're becoming so much more common and that so many more people in mainstream business are actually using them. But if you don't know how to use them, it's like a knife. It can cut deep. You know, you need to know how to use a knife. You need to know how to use a tarot deck. So I'll give my 2 cents worth of 17 years of tarot reading in half an hour to keep people safe and so that they know how to use this tool, because it's a beautiful tool. All right, so I think we're going to wrap this up and thank virtually Nasia and Jose for joining us in spirit. Thank you so much for coming to the Zoom party. I feel very loved and very supported, and I wanted to extend my thanks and for all the wisdom that you've shared today. I think it's been beautiful. I think it's quite nice that you get to meet each other as well after being on separate screens on the platform for so long since July. And I might do more of these so that my guests get to know each other and get to share their wisdom along the way. So thank you ever so much. And thank you everyone who's been watching this live stream. And of course, I've shared the link to the podcast underneath this video, and feel free to go and listen. The podcast will be released every Friday. As some of you mentioned, the first one is about are you spiritual? The second is how to cult-proof your spiritual journey. The third one is the interview with Jose Pereira about the wisdom he acquired from being a hostage for 5 years. But then there's so much more to come, so much more. And of course, feel free to submit any idea you want to the podcast, because it's about the listeners. It's not just, it's not much about me. And I really liked what I think that was Emma, but if I got it wrong, please forgive me. The fact that there's no guru. I do not want to be a guru. I do not want followers. Okay, this is not me. I'm here more as a contributor to start conversations, to people to think, and to get people to really tune in to what feels right and what doesn't, including in what I say. So I think it's more of a conversation, even though very often I'll be the only one to talk, at least for a while. People respond to the episodes, but yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop the live stream now.